In addition to that, just talking about some of the field procedures and things like that are part of the maintenance. Other things that we're going to be talking about include safety. Obviously, when it comes to safety, that is an important part, especially for you as a tester, as the repair person. Make sure that you are protected, because different situations, different things could occur depending on where the assembly is, and all those kinds of things. When it comes to safety, talking about some of your personal safety, making sure that you are protected from the different things that could be within that particular assembly, and also the environment around that particular assembly, the environment around you. So those are the kind of things that play a factor when you're looking at the safety safety end of things. In regards to personal safety, you guys heard the term PPE, which is personal protective equipment. Making sure, depending on the situation, and again, where the assembly is located, where you have to go to access the assembly, that could be important. What things you touch, all those kinds of things could be important. So realize, as part of your personal protective equipment, you could have, for example, eye and ear protection. So as an example, if you come across a backflow preventer in a mechanical room where the equipment is really loud, and the decibel level is really high, you may have to have ear protection. Eye protection, you never know what kind of things could pop out during your maintenance work, spring loads, all those kinds of things. You don't want that all of a sudden, getting into your eye, those kind of situations. So you need eye and ear protection. Some of the hard hats, again, depending on where you're going to, the area above you could potentially be dangerous. So again, protecting yourself, make sure you have the hard hat. Shoes, the kind of shoes that you need, steel toe, all those kinds of things, because hey, when you're working on some of these assemblies, we're looking at some pretty heavy components that are all metal, that could weigh between 50 to 100 pounds. And just imagine if all of a sudden some of those components fall on your feet, kind of thing, the damage that could occur. So again, protective shoes is important. Protective gloves also important. The fact that, hey, if you're doing any maintenance work, realize that you're digging into the potable system. So you want to make sure that you have gloves, not so that any oils that are in your hand, things like that, doesn't get into the particular assembly that's running potable water. And then the other way around is you want to protect your skin, your hands, and so forth. So again, different things that are needed. There are other things that you may need. So just realize, make sure that for personal safety, you have all the equipment needed depending on the situation that you're working with. Okay, so again, that is a very important part of the safety end of things. In addition to the personal safety, we're looking at the environment. Okay, realize there may be situations where you may be dealing with things like confined spaces, some of the other utilities around that area, electric, gas, all that kind of stuff, and just the environment around you could be a potential issue in regards to safety. So again, realize that as you look around, look at the environment. With confined spaces, you guys know, all the things that need to be done in regards to the confined space, or the planning, or the preparing that you need to do. Realize that is a very important part of things. So again, make sure that you get all the necessary equipment and so forth if you are entering in a confined space. And some of you are saying, really? They put backflow preventers in confined spaces? You bet. Okay, you see sometimes where backflow preventers are in the vault location, and the vault location is a confined space area. So realize that some of you may actually have to go down to a confined space area to actually work on that particular assembly. So there are, if you guys look on websites, there are classes, training, and so forth on confined space, how to deal with it, how to handle it, all the permits, everything that needs to be done. So realize if you are going to be caught in a situation like that, make sure that you appropriately deal with confined space entry and so forth. So that is an important issue. Some of the other things that you may see, and this was not set up. This is actually an installation where you see, for example, here an RP assembly, and the relief valve port happens to be right above, guess what, an electrical panel. So again, some of the electrical hazards you may come across where you may see these kinds of things. So again, for your safety, be careful. Just be prepared because you never know what you're going to see out there. Okay. Also, some of the enclosures, okay, realize that some of the enclosures that are being used nowadays, a lot of these enclosures are used for things like freeze protection, because we know that, with any of the water freezing, it can damage not only the pipes, but also the backflow preventer and so forth. So if there's an area where there could be a hard freeze, as an example, realize that some of the enclosures also have heaters in them. So again, as part of what you're looking at is you may have to deal not only with the water issue through the backflow preventer, but also there could be electrical connections in that particular enclosure around that particular assembly for the heaters and stuff that have to be in there to keep the assembly from freezing. So sometimes you see heaters, sometimes you see heat tape, things like that. So again, realize those are some of the electrical hazards that you may have to deal with as a tester, just within the installation, the enclosure, and things like that. Okay. Also, in regards to situations you may come across, does this ever happen? You bet. When you have an assembly in a vault location that may not have drainage or may not have adequate drainage in the vault, things like this could happen where all of a sudden it could get flooded. So again, how are you as a tester going to deal with it, not only with the testing, but also with the maintenance work that may be done here? So part of this may be, you have to pump the water out to make sure that that assembly is not actually submerged while you work on that particular assembly. So again, realize some of the things that you may come across in regards to some of the assemblies. All the way to the point where you see this one and this other one, and you notice, yeah, again, the assembly is submerged in this vault, but you notice what's off to the wall there. Electrical hookup, because you have some of these switches and things like that. So again, obviously water and electricity don't mix well together, so be careful with those kinds of things. Okay, so again, for your safety, the area around you, the environment, the location of the assembly could play a very important factor in making sure things are done correctly before you start working on that particular assembly. Again, for safety, some of the things, as we mentioned, some of the enclosures that are out there, don't be surprised if you encounter things in the enclosure itself, because a lot of these enclosures actually have a way to drain things out. So for example, if an RP is in this enclosure and the relief valve does start discharging, there has to be a way in which that water can drain out of the enclosure. You, again, don't want that assembly submerged. You don't want that enclosure flooded, things like that. So because of that, there are openings, access panels, access doors, things like that within that particular assembly to, again, drain any water that could be going into that particular enclosure. Well, yeah, water comes out of that opening, but also things can go in out of that opening. So we have heard testers where all of a sudden, as they come to an assembly, they see their enclosure, they're very careful in opening up that enclosure. Again, part of your safety, because you never know what you'll find in there. As an example, one of the testers found this. Okay, they actually found a nest or a family of snakes in an enclosure. And I'm not sure if maybe they heard the rattling coming out, a rattling sound out of there. But again, for your safety, realize some of the things that you need to be aware of when it comes to the location of that particular assembly. Okay. Not only with that assembly, but also in regards to safety, your gauge equipment. Where do you store your gauge equipment? Because sometimes you may see an example of this. So depending where your gauge equipment is stored, sometimes you leave it in the back of your truck kind of thing, out in the open, out in the environment, and lo and behold, all of a sudden you see this little critter, the scorpion, things like that, that could all of a sudden be, living right on the field test kit. So again, realize even the gauge equipment that you're going to be looking at, observe, okay? Make sure there's nothing that potentially could be a safety hazard, okay? And I know there's been a number of talks in a lot of the backflow conferences talking about these kind of issues, you know, spider bites, snakes, all those kinds of scorpions, things like that. So there's been a number of presentations, you know, talking to testers about how to handle those kind of hazards. And, you know, you talk to testers and they will tell you that, yeah, from time to time, they may see these kinds of things. So again, be careful out there.